Hello and welcome to the Capacity Audit Masterclass today. I am super excited to have you here. And I think this is an area of conversation that really needs to happen because what a lot of people don't understand is what is draining your energy and your momentum is not your effort. It is actually your capacity and your nervous system. So I am really excited to get started today. Just gonna get onto my page here. And I just want to introduce myself. I am Lisa Adams. I am a owner of The Regulated Leader and Lisa Adams Coaching. I am an author. I am a speaker. I have been coaching since 2015. I am a proud spouse to a 25-year veteran. I have been helping people who have been impacted by trauma, those who live it, those who also support it. I also have my own personal nervous system struggles that I've been learning how to regulate for most of my adult life. And when I start talking about how the capacity audit has been formed, it is actually based a lot on my personal experience and my education in the social work field, as well as life coaching with trauma and behaviors. And so I am like so many, I am also a survivor of trauma too. So, what we're going to talk about today and why we are here is we are going to learn about different pillars. There's 6 different pillars we're actually going to really go through. We're going to have an opportunity for you to take the audit as we go through this process. And I am going to share that in the chat with you all right now. Please know that if you are watching this as a replay, they can be found in the comments section. So there you go. It is now in the comments what the audit will look like. Please just have a look at it. But also get yourself a pen and paper because that is where we're going to write things down and we're going to go through. And you'll have the copy of the audit to go through after this. So what we're going to learn today, first off, why are you stuck? You don't need more discipline. You got the hustle. You know the answers, but you're stuck. 2, how your nervous system runs the show. So understanding the 4 protection responses, keeping you in survival mode instead of growing. 3, your 6 capacity pillars. This is where you're going to rate yourself across the 6 areas where energy, focus, and momentum really are made or they're lost. Then number 4, your biggest capacity drain. So you're going to identify exactly where your nervous system is basically working the hardest for you. And then we're going to determine where that is. And that is actually going to be your starting point. And then 5th, what can you do about it? Understanding what your results mean, get a clear understanding of what's happening with your nervous system, and then be able to take informed next steps. So, how are we going to go through this? If you have a pen and paper, I would certainly encourage you to have it with you. This is going to be beneficial as we start to go through the audit specifically. And we are going to need to write down some scores, some previous scores that where you think you might be at, and actually the scores that you're going to be. But we'll get there in a second. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to go grab that paper. Most people do have that around. their computer desk if that is where you are watching from today. So first, I'm going to teach you the concepts. Understand why each pillar matters for your capacity. Secondly, we're going to rate 5 statements from 1 to 5. And it's really important that you are honest with yourself. And if you feel comfortable, please feel free to put in the chat or make comments if you're watching this on the replay after. I want to know what your thoughts are, how you're feeling as we go through this process. So we're going to rate ourselves from 1 to 5. 1, rarely true. 5, almost always true. We're going to write down your pillar score. So each pillar is going to have a maximum score of 25. Each question is worth 5 points. So you can see where we're going to kind of go from there. We will debrief after each result, what it means for your nervous system, and maybe where you want to start with next steps. And then you're going to leave knowing where your number 1 drain is and exactly where you need to start focusing on first. So it's going to be helpful if you draw 6 boxes on your paper, 1 for each of the pillars. Each one is going to have 5 questions, and it'll be a great place to actually track what your score is. So why does this audit matter? Most people really think that they're stuck because they need more discipline, more motivation, a better strategy. But in actual fact, that is not true. The problem does not come from your efforts. The problem comes from where your capacity is. So you can move forward at the speed of your system can support. You cannot move forward at a speed that you think that your brain wants you to. We all have this thought process. We want the next quick thing. How do we quickly get there? How do I start making a profit? How do I lead my people better? However, if we do not have the capacity within our nervous system and our nervous system is activated all the time, we will never make those steps forward in the space that we want. So this is why we're doing this. So when your nervous system is overloaded, everything, your habits, your decisions, your momentum, everything becomes harder. And that is really difficult when you want to be a leader, when you want to achieve bigger things, and you want to make money, possibly. A lot of people who are leaders are in their specific areas. If you're in my school community, it's because you want to grow your school community. So it's really important to recognize that when you are overloaded and your nervous system is activated, you actually will have a harder time to achieve the goals and the things that you have set. So what we're talking about today, the goal isn't to find what's wrong with you. Today is about finding out where your energy is leaking from. And then that can be the biggest starting point for you to be able to move forward. Going the wrong way. Sorry about that. Okay, so here is the nervous system connection. So your nervous system is constantly asking itself, do I have capacity for this? And do I feel safe? So when it feels safe, it can take a very clear look and have an action plan. It can learn because it energizes you. Problems feel solvable. You're in a really great creative flow, and you can reset and recover quickly. Now, when it feels threatened, it shifts into a protection mode and it feels unsafe. Sometimes your decisions feel foggy and heavy. Simple tasks feel exhausting. That might even just be looking at your calendar and seeing what's happened. happening for that day. It could be you have a to-do list that you want to get through, but even the thought of doing it is overwhelming. Um, a great example that I can give you for that is when I start to feel overcapacity, my body goes, nope, you're really tired. Nope, you need a break. I'm going to start playing video games and I will start to scroll. And for me, that's an indicator that I'm overcapacity. And then I get to do some self-reflection and then I figure out what I need to do to fill up my cup, as some would say, or to regulate that nervous system so that I can go back to being in the capacity level of being able to make those decisions more clearly. Your momentum stalls out. So for many of us, our ceiling will stop when our body and our nervous system does not feel safe. And we may have been following this pattern for a long time, and we're going to get more into that. And you may get so far as you're building your business, and then it'll automatically stop. And when that stop happens, you go, what the hell? Like, I don't know why I get to this far. I know what I'm doing. I know I have something that can be really successful. However, I never get to move forward in it. And that might be even starting off with a small course. It might be a classroom that you have if you're in the school community. And now you're struggling and you don't understand why you have a good foundation of information, but you don't know how to get it to the next level. And reset feels impossible, or you feel guilty. I have many clients that I work with and I speak to that this one probably feels the most difficult for them to do. They feel if they're resting and they are not doing anything, then that means that they are not doing what they need to do to be successful. And when this actually happens, they start to feel extremely guilty. And then they end up overworking and then they end up in burnout and or overthinking. And these things are never going to work for somebody to be able to move their business forward or their leadership forward if you don't have the opportunity to actually rest. Because rest is when your brain and your nervous system has the ability to come back to capacity. It has the ability to heal itself. It has the ability to do a lot of the things that we need to be able to move forward as a leader. So your system moves into a protection mode. And that only happens when we're in depletion or if there's some sort of trigger behavior. But we're not actually talking about triggers today. We're actually talking about the behavior that shows up, which is very similar to what a trigger would be for the nervous system. It's just done in a different way. So what you might find when your body moves into that protection mode and you're going, why can't I do this? And you are already at capacity, there's the fight. So that is when perfectionism is really important. You need to control everything. You're overworking and you're defensive when somebody suggests something to you that you may not like because you have a certain way that you thought it was going to be done. And it's really important that you recognize what that could look like for you. Um, I can tell you that I have clients that need to have everything perfected. They will not put a classroom live in their school community if they have not had it done to the way that they believe that it should be. And what they don't understand by having this perfectionism piece of it is that they're missing out. And so flight is that overthinking. It's making yourself look like you're busy, even though your busyness is not anything that's going to move your business forward. You're constantly planning. So you're always planning what you're going to do next, what the next step is going to be, what you want that to look like, but you're not taking any of the action steps. And you have difficulty resting. So we had just talked about that. You know, resting is super important. You need to be continuously doing something to feel like you're moving forward. But in actual fact, that is a response to the nervous system. Freeze. freezes that procrastination. I am a terrible procrastinator and have gotten a lot better at it because I start to reflect a lot now. And in that reflection, you can start to notice when that procrastination starts. Am I a procrastinator still for packing to go someplace? Absolutely. However, when it comes to my business, I make sure I have a plan for the week that I'm going to focus on. And the only time it shifts significantly is if something else kind of steps in that takes more of a priority. Avoidance. Avoidance is another thing that I do when my body's at capacity. I'll start scrolling the phone, playing video games, um, finding other ways to occupy my time because I just don't want to do something. And in actual fact, it's because my nervous system is at capacity. Feeling stuck, feeling like you don't know how to move forward, even though you have the answers. And brain fog. That's like, oh, what was it that I was just doing? What was I just saying? That happens a lot. So it's really important to start to recognize what shows up for you and how does your nervous system go into protection mode. And then there's fawn. And fawn is that people pleasing, overcommitting to things, difficulty saying no, seeking approval. So I can tell you that in my other occupation, I am helping to do things for a grade 9 for a while and preparing everything. And I've overcommitted myself. This weekend, for a prime example, is I am decorating for a kindergarten, shopping to finish the stuff for the grade 9s, farewell. I am going to Calgary to be a fight inspector, coming back, trying to prepare for another masterclass. So you can see that I do a lot of committing to things. And that's not saying that I can't do all of those. It's just making sure that I have spaces so that I can also rest. It's super important to be able to do that. And then seeking other people's approval. And one of the ways that you may notice that is actually sharing all of your education, your experiences, your knowledge, your successes, because that is also a way that we show that, hey, you know what? I'm really smart over here. I know what I'm doing, and you need to come work with me. And then sometimes that's really important. And we want people to know what our experiences in our education is. However, the same token, if we're continuously doing that, people aren't really getting to know you and starting to trust you. They are just utilizing that time to be able to see, oh, this person just needs they just want me to go, oh yeah, you're great or whatever. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just wanting you to start to understand and see that this might be part of your nervous system protecting you. And again, I just want to stress, these are not character flaws. These are survival strategies that your nervous system has learned to keep you safe. Now, I want to ask, are you finding that some of these are familiar to you? And if you are, please set them in the chat or put them in the comments down below if you are watching the replay, because I think it's really important that we can see what is happening with everybody here. So now we're going to start talking about the 6 capacity pillars. And these are the areas where we're going to start rating ourselves out of 5. And each pillar has a score of 25. So I would suggest that if you could, on your paper that you have, take it and break it down into 6 sections. Each section will have 5 questions. So we're going to talk about input. And the input is what you're taking in. What is the information that's coming in? Number 2 is processing. How you make sense of the information. So that is taking the time, how your body in your brain perceives the information that you are taking in. Then it's the architecture. So that is your system supporting your success. So this is the areas of systems that we automatically naturally put in place that makes us help us be successful. Then there's the output. That's turning that intention into action. Are you putting it into action? Are we missing something? What is happening there? Then there's the review, and that's actually taking the time to learn from your results. And then there's the recovery. And the recovery is the restoring of energy and of your capacity as you move forward. So I hope everybody has taken a second to write that down. We're going to start with the first pillar. And the first pillar, as I had mentioned, is input. And that is what you're taking in. Why this pillar really matters is because your nervous system can only process so much information. And when the input actually exceeds our capacity, everything downstream starts to suffer. Our decisions suffer, our action suffers, our rest suffers. And you may see that if you have a lot of different things going on and you're stressed, you don't sleep very well, do you? So it's really important to recognize that piece, right? So when we do have the capacity for the input, we're more focused. We can be creative. We like to learn. We have clear filters for what matters. We know the action steps we need to take. We have more mental clarity. So here's the first question that I want you to answer out of 5. And remember, you need to be honest with yourself when you're doing this, because if you're not going to get the best place where you should start to regulate that nervous system, to try to figure out where that ceiling is, because your capacity needs to begin where you are having the most difficult time. So the very first area that we're going to score is I consume more information than I take action on. The second question is I feel overwhelmed by the amount of information available. And remember, this is out of 5. 1 being, yep, this is good. 5 being, this is something that happens every day I struggle with. 3, I frequently jump between ideas, strategies, or resources. So this is when you have a lot of ideas or something pops in your head and you stop what you're doing and you just move to the next idea. Or you have a strategy that you want to implement, but you have missed several different parts of what is happening and what's going on. So it's really important to recognize what is happening there. Next question that you're going to rate out of 5 is I struggle to determine what information actually matters. And as a coach, a leader, an entrepreneur, a school owner, you're going to find the information that actually matters comes from your clients, your school members, your sales potentially. It really just depends on what it is that your industry is in and what you are leading. It is really important to recognize where you are there. Again, 1 is I'm doing a great job here, feels good. 5 is almost always I'm struggling. So really true. 1, 5, almost always. The last question is I often feel mentally overloaded after meetings, trainings, and conversations. And this one here also can look very different. And so mental overload can show up in a number of different ways. It can show up as anxiety. It can show up as overwhelm. It can show up as I have so much more work to do. I need to get into this right away. And sometimes those conversations that we have can also make us feel that way. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just about being aware of what's happening. So we've done the first pillar now. And I would love for you to just add up your score and see where you're at out of the 25. So here's what your score actually means for input. So if you've scored 5 to 10, if you're comfortable, feel free to share it in the comments or into the chat here. As it's really also important to understand that you're not the only one who may be feeling the exact same way. There could be other people who are watching the replay or who have commented in the chat that are going through some of the same things that you are. So it's really important to recognize that. So your score from 5 to 10, that's a strong capacity. You manage information and intake well. You focus on what matters and filter out the noise. Now, if you scored 11 to 17, that is capacity friction. You're consuming more than you're actually taking in and integrating. There's a gap between taking in and taking action. And that's really important to also recognize and understand what is happening with you within your input. And then there's 18 to 25, and that's capacity drain. Information overload is real for you. Your nervous system spends a significant amount of energy just trying to keep up. So think about that. When you are trying to build a business, be a strong leader, and you're just trying to keep up, that can feel pretty overwhelming, I would think. I know for me, it has in the past. And again, I would love for you to comment and share how you might be feeling. So, why does this pillar and what does this really mean for you? So, when your input pillar is high, your nervous system is constant state of processing. So, it's leaving less capacity for decisions, for the relationships, for taking action to build your business, and for rest. More important, this information is not more power when your system can't integrate it. This creates a cycle. More important, the less output you have, the more frustration you actually feel. So then what would your next step be? Before adding anything new, such as a course, a strategy, a tool, you need to ask yourself this: have I fully applied what I already know? Your next move is integration, not more information. I'm going to say that again. Your next move is integration, not more information. So here's something, a pattern to look out for and kind of pay attention to is hypervigilance. So that's a high input score can mean that you're staying busy with learning to avoid the discomfort of doing. And again, some of that doing part is because our nervous system, if we hit a certain ceiling, it gets scared and it starts to feel unsafe. Not because we can't do it, but because we're over capacity and that it's something that's unfamiliar and it likes to stay in the avenue of what feels good and what it already knows. That's how your nervous system likes to stay safe. Pillar number two. Pillar number two is the processing of information. Processing what happens between receiving the information and taking action. And when it's backed up, that's when you start to overthink, you start ruminating, and your thoughts just continuously go on a loop. And that's when freeze happens. And some of the things you might see here, if you have a lower score, is clear ground decisions are made. You have the ability to move from an idea to something that's actioned easily. You have mental clarity and focus, and you have confidence. So here are the questions that I would like for you to answer out of 5. Remember, 1, rarely true. 5, almost always. Number 1, I overthink my decisions. So a lot of people can be really indecisive or they overthink. And before committing to a decision, they may take 2 weeks, 2 months, whatever that might look like. And they don't, as some people would say, pull the trigger to make that decision. And it's really important to understand why that might be happening. So, this is a really great question to answer. Again, if you have comments or questions with regards to these things, please write it in the chat or in the comment section. Next question. I spend more time thinking than acting. So, are you the person that may have a school community that you're constantly thinking about what you want to do? You have ideas, you write them down, but you're not taking any action? You're not going live. What might that look like for you? The next question is I replay conversations or situations repeatedly. So that's when you're in your head and you're continuously repeating those conversations or situations that have happened to make sure that, like, you may, say, oh, I should have said this differently. Oh, I could have done that differently, so on and so forth. So this is just bringing an awareness to it. So are you doing that? 1 is rarely true. 5 is almost always. 4, I struggle to prioritize. So this can be a really difficult one too, because everything is a priority for some people and they feel like they're not sure where they need to go to figure out what the next step is. So it's really important to recognize that too. Again, rarely true is 1, almost always is 5. And then the last question for processing is my mind often feels cluttered or noisy. 1, rarely true. 5, always true. And then once you've done that, take a second and I want you to add up your score and see what you get out of 25. Again, if you'd like to share where your score lands, please do so in the chat or the comment section. So, pillar 2 and processing. What does your score mean? Between 5 and 10, you have a strong capacity. So you move from thinking to acting with relative ease. Decision making is clear and grounded. If you've scored between 11 and 17, there is capacity friction. So that's that overthinking is slowing you down, more time in your head than in motion. And then 18 to 25 is capacity drain. So this is that mental overload is significant. Decisions feel heavy, your mind feels noisy, and forward movement is really hard sometimes to do here. So what this really means for you is overthinking is not a thinking problem. And I think that's really important to understand that overthinking is not a thinking problem. It's a regulation problem. And this is when your system perceives uncertainty as a threat and it keeps just looping and replaying and reviewing and reassessing all of the things that have been happening as the way of feeling in control. So this is your way to feel like you have some sort of control on what's happening. And that result can be exhausting. And you need to be able to find a way to process. So here's your next step. This goal is not to think better. It's to feel safer while deciding. So start with a small, low stake decision and practice committing without over justifying anything. And that could be just a coffee, right? Because sometimes you can go to the coffee shop and it can take 5 minutes to decide what coffee I'm going to drink that day. And it's just, I'm going to have this. Here in Canada, we have Tim Hortons, so I'm going to go have a double. Starbucks, caramel macchiato, just go in and say, this is what I'm getting today, or try something new that maybe not something you would normally do. So the pattern to watch for, this is your freeze and avoidance. It's a high processing score often means your nervous system is using thinking as a way to avoid moving forward. So that's something I just want to repeat. This is your nervous system's way of using thinking to avoid moving forward? What is it trying to move away from? Is it success? It's possible. So the architecture, this is pillar 3. This is the system supporting your success. So here's why this pillar really matters. Your environment and your workflow are the external scaffolding of your nervous system. So your nervous system relies on to feel safe and capable. So without it, your brain holds more. It increases your cognitive load. So your scaffolding or your architecture or your, I'm trying to think of the word that I'm looking for. Your workflow, your environment is the part that you have in place to help you be able to move forward within your structure or your support. So an example of that might be, um, there is some people that are extremely fantastic at organization. So whether it's paper file organization or even your dresser organization, or there's people that are really great at having everything done in spreadsheets, in files, on your computer. You know where everything is. It's done in a certain way that's easy to navigate. And then there's other people, those systems are not great and they get overwhelmed. And that is when you will find that nervous system kind of kicking in. I can give you examples of that. I will tell you that I have one part of my office right now. It is full of different things. So fake flowers that I'm putting into my backyard as we renovate the backyard. It has some, I'm looking at it now as I'm in the office. There is cushions for our backyard, for our deck because it had been raining. So we just brought them into the office here. And as things stack up in here, it gets more overwhelming for me. And I don't want to come use this space. But if it's clean and it's functionable, this is a wonderful space that I can actually utilize as a brainstorming workflow place. So it's just something to consider that what does that look like for you? So an architectural support can be clear, reliable systems, organized workflow, as we just talked about, easy to find next steps, tasks don't get dropped. So here's our questions. Again, you're going to answer them 1 out of 5. 1, rarely true. 5, almost always true. First question is, my system does not adequately support my goals. Second question, my workflow or environment feels disorganized. Rarely true, 1, always true, almost always true, 5. Remember, being honest in these conversations are super important to see where you need to start. I waste time figuring out where to start. 1, rarely true, 5, almost always true. Question number 4, important tasks fall through the cracks. Rarely true, 1, almost always true, 5. I lack consistent systems that help me flow. Sorry, I lack consistent systems that help me flow through. What that means is not having any systems in place to make your workflow a little bit easier. Add them up. What did you get out of 25? Again, please feel if you want to share, please share it in the comments or the chat. So the architecture, what your score means. 5 to 10, you have strong capacity. Your environment and systems are largely supporting your goal. You have the structure that works. 11 to 17, that's that capacity friction as we've been talking about here. The systems are letting things fall through the cracks. Structure is creating a drag rather than giving you support. And then if you are in the 18 to 25, that capacity drain, that lack of structure is costing you significant energy. You're starting from scratch too often. Maybe because you can't find the file, you don't know where you've put the information. Maybe it's the decision making, maybe it's the brainstorming. It could be a number of different things. However, it's important to realize what is happening within your architecture, within that pillar. Now, what this means for you, a dysregulated nervous system will resist structure. It can feel constricting while simultaneously suffering from the chaos that can cause for results. When the architecture is weak, your brain has to hold on to more information, which increases the cognitive load and it depletes your capacity you need for everything else that you're trying to do. This is the one of the most common capacity leaks in driven leaders. Let me say that again. This is one of the biggest issues that people have as a capacity leak as driven leaders. This is your energy suck right here. So here's the next step for this one. Pick one system to fix this week. Not all of them. Having too many things to do can be extremely overwhelming and it's putting more stress within all of your pillars. So where are you losing the most of your time or your energy? That is where you need to start. One clear system creates momentum for the rest. So here's a pattern to watch for. Overwork, improving. A high architectural score can lead to recreating work and exhausting yourself trying to compensate for missing structure. Does that happen to you? What does it look like for you? Is this something that you think that you can do to move forward? Pillar 4 is output. This is turning intention into action. Why this pillar matters is the output is everything that shows up or doesn't show up. But low input is rarely about laziness. It's always about your nervous system protecting you from something. So when we are in low and we are in that 1 to 5 range, we're constantly following through with things. We have good, strong momentum. We get the task completed and our intention matches our actions. So again, we're going to score out of 5. 1, rarely true. 5, almost always. First question is procrastinate on important tasks. Do you procrastinate? Do you put them off until last minute? What does that look like for you? You start a project, but don't finish them. So you have a great idea and you're like, okay, I'm going to work on this. And then all of a sudden you kind of lose the momentum. Something happens that you're not feeling as motivated for potentially. How does that work for you? Rarely true, almost always true. I struggle to maintain momentum. What does that look like? 4, I avoid tasks that would move me forward. So you know there's things that you need to do to move your success forward. Whether that's building out a new offer, whether that's engaging new people, making social media posts potentially, making a new classroom, finding a new content information, whatever that may look like. There's all kinds of things that could look like, but what is it that you are avoiding? And then lastly, I know what to do, but don't consistently do it. So consistently not doing something is one of those ways that we're never going to end up succeeding. So what does that look like for you? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. I think that's really important to notice. This is for information to find out where your capacity is and where your ceiling is. So you can start there in regulating your nervous system and being able to move forward. So 1, rarely true. 5, almost always. Add that up and see where you ended up out of 25. So here's what your score means. So 5 to 10 is that strong capacity. You consistently follow through, turn your intention into action, and maintain momentum. That 11 to 17 score is your capacity friction. There's a gap between knowing and doing, getting started, but struggling to sustain. And then there's that 18 to 25, the capacity drain. That's that follow through. That is a significant challenge. That procrastination and avoidance are costing you momentum, and it's costing you your confidence. So what does this really mean? So a high output score is really about laziness and lack of motivation. It's almost always nervous system protecting you from something. Is it failure? Is it success? Visibility? Judgment? Overwhelming? Your system doesn't feel safe enough to move forward, and it will find a way to stop you every time. Every time it will. And you're going to notice that in patterns. And even when you're desperately wanting to go and to move forward, this is where you're going to find self-sabotage. So here's your next step. Before pushing harder, you need to ask, what is my nervous system afraid will happen if I follow through? The answer to that is the question is more useful than any productivity strategy. So the pattern to watch for is that sabotage loop. A high output means you're more likely getting in your own way at the threshold of progress. And that work is the nervous system's regulation, no matter how much discipline you have. Pillar 5 is the review. And this one is what you're learning from the results. And not the results from what we're doing here specifically, but it's from all of your results. So why this pillar matters is review is the feedback loop that allows you to grow. And without it, we keep doing what doesn't work and wonder why nothing's changing. You know, we have that saying, you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. Well, it won't happen if we continuously do the same thing. So if we're in the lower score and we're in that capacity from 1 to 5, you're going to notice regular reflection practice. You're probably learning and adjusting really quickly. You're tracking your progress clearly, and evidence-based decisions is how you are moving forward. So if something is not working and there's evidence to show there, you're going to shift. So again, you're going to answer these questions from 1 to 5. 1 is rarely true. 5 is almost always true. Question number 1 is, I rarely stop to evaluate what's working. Are you evaluating what you are doing? Are you shifting? Are you navigating? Are you pivoting? Pivoting is really important. Sorry, bless me. Number 2, I repeat the same pattern. Are you seeing the same patterns happening all the time? So you get so fair in your business and then something happens and then you end up struggling again and you're not sure why, because you know what you're supposed to be doing, but something happens that puts the brakes on for you. Again, 1, rarely true. 5, almost always. Question number 3, I move on before reflecting. Rarely true, number 1. 5, almost always true. Next, I struggle to measure progress objectively. And I do want to suggest here that when you look at things, you have to look at things on a logical aspect, not the emotional. A lot of us can be really passionate, and it can be difficult to kind of put a pause on what we know is emotional. Is it okay to have emotions? 100% it is. Is it okay to feel frustrated or whatever? Absolutely. However, we need to really have the opportunity to be objective. And if we're not, this is a good sign. Again, we need to be honest here. Number one, rarely true. Five, almost always true. And lastly, the last question, I rely more on feelings than on evidence. Again, there's no right or wrong answers for these. It's really important just to see where we are sitting and where we're landing within these pillars. One, rarely true. Five, almost always true. Once you've answered all of these questions, put your score out of 25. Where did you land? What does that look like? Please feel free to share it. So now here's what your score means in review. 5 to 10 is that strong capacity. When you reflect well, you learn from your experience, you adjust, you grow from your results. So that is seeing what needs to happen in a logical way, objectively, and being able to pivot or shift when needed. 11 to 17 is that capacity friction. So that's when you're moving too fast to learn from what's happening. You have patterns that are continuously repeating without being explained or examined. So that is not taking the time to be objective to see what's actually happening. And then you have your 18 to 25, and that's a capacity drain again, right? And that's stuck in that repetition without reflection. It's the same cycles and it's the same costing time. It's costing you energy. It's costing you results. It's costing you profit. Think about that. What this means for you. Review this. Review is the pillar most often skipped by high achieving leaders. There's always something next, but without the reflection, you repeat the patterns in your business, in your relationships, in your leadership that cost you more than time reflection takes. So I'm just going to read that again. So in leadership, that costs far more than your time reflection takes. A nervous system is a high driven mode, resists slowing down because stopping can trigger feelings that busyness has been keeping at bay. What that means is sometimes we stay busy and we keep moving forward because we don't want to feel what's happening. We don't want to sit in our emotion. And that is part of our nervous system trying to keep us safe because it doesn't like when we're in that area. However, it's super important that we do take those times to reflect and reset. So the pattern to watch for here is that hypervigilance and proving. A high review score can mean that you're moving way too fast to stay ahead of the discomfort that you never stop to learn from where you've been. So the sixth pillar, the last pillar that we're going to go through here is recovery, and that's the restoring energy and capacity. And if you have a low score in this, you're going to feel that rest feels genuinely restorative. You're going to have clear boundaries between your work and life. You're going to have downtime that is completely guilt-free, and you're going to have sustainable energy. So why this matters is recovery isn't just a reward of hard work. It's the foundation of capacity. A nervous system that cannot reset cannot regulate. And a nervous system that cannot regulate cannot lead. And I'm not saying that it can't lead 100% because there's a lot of dysregulated leaders out there. However, can you imagine how much better or how much more success they could do if they were regulated and they had the opportunity to restore their energy and capacity? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start answering these questions. Again, 1, rarely true. 5, almost always true. I feel tired even when I get enough sleep. I struggle to disconnect from work or responsibilities. And that can be a really hard one sometimes for us because work is there, especially if you are a leader, you're an entrepreneur, you're a CEO of a company and have lots of different people under you. If you are a school community owner, you are trying to generally build engagement. You have so many different parts and moving pieces to that. What does that look like for you? Next is I feel guilty when resting. Rarely true, almost always true. My mind stays active even when my body stops. I push through exhaustion instead of recovering. So that's when that burnout starts to happen. It doesn't matter. I just need to get through. Um, in my husband's world as a soldier, it was you soldier on, you put one boot in front of the other, and you keep going. Once you have completed answering those five in a score, add up your score and see where you landed. Recovery and what your score means. So strong capacity is at 5 to 10. You recover well, your reset restores you, and you are able to protect your energy with your intentions. 11 to 17 is that capacity friction. Rest isn't fully restoring you. You're carrying more than your system can sustainably hold. 18 to 25 is that capacity drain. Your nervous system is running on empty. You're operating from depletion. You're building from depletion. Does not work. You are not going to be able to be sustainable and successful if you are an 18 to 25 in that capacity drain for recovery. So what this really means for you, a high recovery score often means your system has learned that rest is not safe and that it must stay alert all the time. It needs to be productive. It needs to be useful. It needs to justify your place. That belief is worth examining directly. Rest is not the absence of productivity. It's actually the source of it. And I think it's really important just to say that again. Um, Rest is not the absence of productivity. It's the source of it. It is the key important part of being able to have capacity to increase your ceiling, to be able to become the successful person that you want to be. Your next step here. This week, choose one form of genuine recovery, not passive scrolling, but something real restorative, and protect it like an appointment. Your capacity depends on it. So that might be something like going to a movie, reading a book, going for a walk. There's a lot of different things that I'd love to get to hear from my clients when it comes to this, because this is probably the most difficult thing, because again, they have that guilt piece, but it can be as quick and as comforting as a cup of coffee on your deck in the summertime. It doesn't have to be big and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. It just has to be something that brings you a little bit of joy. And then you can add, if this is something that's really difficult for you, then you add the next step and the next piece. And then what brings you joy and that recovery becomes a little bit easier. So patterns to watch for is shrinking and people pleasing. A high recovery score means you're giving your energy away to others and leaving nothing for yourself. I have been guilty of this in the past. I grew up being a people pleaser and needing to do everything and wanting to help everybody, to the point that there came a time that I was almost not able to help anybody, including myself, for a while. So this is a really important one. So now I want you to add up all of your scores. Where did you end up landing? What is your highest score? Again, if you're comfortable, share it in the comments, share it in the chat. So here's what we know. 5 out of 10 is building capacity and momentum. 11 out of 17 is that capacity friction. That's that noticeable friction, and it's slowing your progress down. And that capacity drain, that 18 to 25, that's actively draining your energy and your momentum. So where is your biggest capacity drain? Which pillar had your highest score? Again, there's no right or wrong answers to which pillar it is. For everybody, it will be different. So this is the area most likely showing your momentum, slowing your momentum, draining your energy, and making everything feel harder than it needs to be. Your highest score is not your weakness. It's where your system is working the hardest. And that is exactly where you need to focus first for the biggest shift. So remember, your highest score is not your weakness. It's simply the place where your system is working the hardest and where the small shifts will have the biggest impact across every area of your life and your work. Something to think about there, because this is the area of your nervous system that feels the least safe. So here's some reflection questions, and I want you to be honest with them. I think it's really important. And share them in the comments or the chat if you feel comfortable to do so. What surprised you the most about your results? Where are you losing most of your energy right now? What would improve if this bottleneck was removed? What is the one action you can take this week to strengthen that pillar? So now that you know where your bottlenecks is, what's next? The capacity reveals where you're losing the energy. And the regulated leader can show you how to build it back up. So here's what happens inside the regulated leader. We have a weekly live coaching call with questions and answers with me. We have nervous system regulation tools and training. Some are free challenges right away that you can start to access depending on where you start. Tools to stop self-sabotage and overthinking. We have burnout recovery and energy mastery. We have implementation challenges and accountability. We have a private community for high-level leaders. And the regulated leader is not for you if you don't want to stop guessing yourself. Break free from burnout. Build habits that actually stick. Lead with clarity and impact. Create sustainability success. Stop sacrificing your well-being. So if you're ready to start, join the regulated leader in the primary tier. It starts creating capacity, confidence, impact. You know you're going here for. So you can find that at school.com reset plans. So here's what happens in the regulated leader. Regulation creates capacity. Awareness creates the choice, which is kind of what we started today. You are not broken. You are overloaded. You are at capacity. Now, I hope I get to see you in the regulated leader. And look forward to our next masterclass. You have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you again.